Hello and welcome to my channel, In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today I am answering Charlene's questions that she asked me all about me and Jane Austen. If you are new to my channel, this year in 2025 is Jane Austen's 250th birthday. And to celebrate, my friend Charlene at Coffee and a Book and I are hosting monthly events, group reads, and other content on our channels, all celebrating Jane Austen and her life and her remarkable body of work, her novels. And today we have a special treat for you. I'm really excited about this. So Charlene and I are each posting a video today, and I will link to hers in the description box as soon as I have the link to it. We each asked each other a list of questions. I asked her a list of questions from her perspective as someone being new to Jane Austen and not an established fan. And she wrote questions for me that I will be answering today from the opposite perspective, the perspective of someone who is a longtime Jane Austen fan. And I mean, what more can we say about that? We all know that about me, right? I am excited to dig into her questions. Hopefully I can read my chicken scratch here because some of this is kind of tiny. So apologies if I have to do this. But anyways, I am going to get into her questions and answer them all about how I love Jane Austen and her books. Charlene's first question for me was, who are your favorite and least favorite characters from each of the Jane Austen books you have read? And at first, when I was writing this down, I felt like my answers were really obvious because like I loved the heroine or the hero of the story and I didn't love the villain in the story. And I was like, okay, girl, we gotta be more creative than that, okay? So I switched gears and I began to think of all of the assorted characters in the books. And I began to think through the ones that I really loved for one reason or another, other than that, just they were the main character in the story. So I think I do still have a couple main characters on here, but I also have some extra characters on here, more side characters that are maybe not so obvious, but that I either love or love to hate. So first of all, Pride and Prejudice. And initially I was going to say, of course, Lizzie, or I could easily say Mr. Darcy. Both of them are amazing characters. There's no doubt. I love them as characters, but that's pretty obvious, right? I actually have some other favorites. And the one I'm going to mention now is Mr. Bingley. I love Mr. Bingley. He's just so friendly. He's just so charming. He's just so unfailingly kind to everyone and very polite, very much a gentleman, even though he technically was a merchant's son and not really a gentleman, wasn't a landed gentleman at that point in the story. But I really love Mr. Bingley. And I just love everything about his character and his personality. I do wish we got a little bit more of him in the story, but my least favorite character actually happens to be his sister. And quite a contrast, let me tell you. Caroline Bingley is mean and vindictive and snobby as all get out and puts on airs when she has no reason to. So yeah, definitely not a character that we love. It's a character we love to hate. And then in Sense and Sensibility, originally I was going to say Eleanor. I really do love Eleanor. I love her common sense. I love how she loves her family, even though if I were her, I would be incredibly frustrated with those sisters and her mother and her brother, not to mention her brother. But she's very patient and kind with them, and she keeps her family together, and she just has great presence, like, and great self-control. She's just really a strong person. Not in the usual way people think of a strong woman, but definitely she's strong. But the character that I decided to go with was Mrs. Jennings. I'm pretty sure that's her name, but she's, and she's kind of like half annoying in some ways. If I knew her in real life, I probably would be irritated by her sometimes, but at the same time, it's like you can't help but love her. She's so generous. She's so loving in her own way. You know, she has a funny way of showing it sometimes, but she is loving in her own way. She provides opportunities for Eleanor and Marianne and their family, the Dashwood family, that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And she takes them to London and she's unfailingly supportive of them, occasionally hurtful, but not intentionally. Like, she's not trying to hurt anybody. She's just a little bit thoughtless sometimes. I do enjoy her as a character, and she adds a little bit of humor into Sense and Sensibility, which is really necessary because honestly, that story is kind of a heavy one and it needs that lightness. And my least favorite character would be Fanny Dashwood. Now, Fanny Dashwood is sister-in-law to Eleanor and Marianne and their younger sister, Margaret. And she is the one who convinces their brother that he doesn't actually have to do anything to help them. And so due to her manipulation, they end up basically homeless and having to scrounge around for themselves with very little help from their brother. Meanwhile, she takes over their house and, you know, pushes them out. And she shows up at other points in the story. She's just generally a horrible person. And then in Emma, I would say one of my favorite characters is Mrs. Weston, who is Emma's governess and who is just a kind and loving person who is a mentor to Emma and is one of the people who can speak to her straight. She's maybe a little bit too much on the kind and generous side. Maybe Emma needs a little bit more of vinegar from Mrs. Weston, for lack of a better word. But Mr. Knightley gives that to her enough. You know, he gives her enough straight talk. Mrs. Weston is more of, you know, the encouraging kind of person who does occasionally give great advice to Emma when she sees a need for it, but is just also very supportive of her and just a sweet person and a kind person. And she's a sort of a side person in the story, but you can tell she's been very influential in Emma's life and also in Mr. Knightley's, because he and Mrs. Weston have conversations together often about Emma, and which is really sweet. And so I just really like Mrs. Weston. I also kind of really don't like Frank Churchill. He's just a slimy character, you know, and you never really can trust him. And even when you find out the whole story behind some of the things that he did, you still feel like, no, I don't like you. Not at all. But it's not like he's an evil villain kind of person. He's just slimy. He's slimy. And then in Northanger Abbey, this is a main character, but I'm going to go with Henry Tilney. I love him as a hero in this story. He's just the perfect person for Catherine Morland, the heroine in this story. He's just the perfect balance to her. And he, as the relationship grows between them, he's obviously very interested in her, but it's just really a beautiful developing of their friendship and their relationship as it grows. And it doesn't seem super romantic at the start. And part of that is because of Catherine Morland's naivety, but it grows beautifully throughout the story. And Henry Tilney, he's very intelligent and he is very thoughtful and he is very considerate. And so I really like him for those reasons. And then John Thorpe is like the complete opposite of him. If you could, like, the exact opposite of that in a person who thinks he's a gentleman and thinks he's all that, but he's really just a bore and a horrible person to boot. Self-centered and doesn't see past the nose on his face. Yeah, don't like him. And then in Mansfield Park, Mary Crawford, mostly because she intrigues me as a character. I think she is one of Austen's most complex characters because you can have sympathy for her even when you can see that there is a very thick vein of hard-heartedness running through her, but you can see that she has been made hard maybe by her life and by the things that she's seen and that she's experienced. And you're always hoping for a softening in her and a reform in her, which I think was maybe part of Edmund Bertram's interest in her. I think that he saw some potential in her for true goodness. And she has moments in this story where you feel like she could be good, but she never gets there during the course of the story. So if you know of a retelling that kind of gives her a redemption arc of some kind, like maybe moving past the era that's in Mansfield Park and maybe things that she learns from that and goes on from that would be interesting to read. Although I'm not sure that anyone could craft her quite as well because it's very, very subtle. She's a very, very subtle character and it would be difficult to do, but I really enjoy her character. And then Maria Bertram is just straight up, she's just like a typical self-centered young woman, rich young woman who thinks she can get whatever she wants, however she wants it, whenever she wants it, and hang the consequences. Even if she hurts someone else in the process, she doesn't care about that. So yeah, not a very good person at all, and I don't like her. And then we have Sir Thomas Bertram, I wanted to mention also as a character that I like. And he has a bit of an arc in his story as well, and some development. Initially, he's just like a typical aristocrat father. But a lot of the story, he is off page. And we don't really get a distinct picture of the things that he goes through. But you get the idea that there is some trial and struggle that he goes through off page that we as the reader and maybe even the family are not privy to, but he comes back from that somewhat changed. And then the things that he finds and he sees and the things that happen in his family when he comes back further serve to humble him and give him insight and wisdom. He's not perfect. He doesn't, you know, completely change into like a perfect person, and neither does his wife. Again, Mansfield Park, those characters, they're so complex. And that's one of the things about that novel that just blew me away when I read it recently last year. So complex. Anyway, so Sir Thomas Bertram, by the end of the story, I really was loving him as a character and how he saw Fanny. Very few people saw Fanny. She was kind of like the person who's in the background and hidden, and he really saw her, and he loved what he saw, you know, in a fatherly sort of way. And his wife also, she in her own limited way saw the value and the good in Fanny. And yeah, I really like how Austen handled his character. Finally, in Persuasion, I like the couple Admiral and Mrs. Croft. They're just fun together. They tell the greatest stories. They have such a great relationship. It's a very equal relationship. It's one of the best marriages in the story, in Persuasion. And I like to think that it was based on maybe one of Austen's brothers and his wife, because she had a couple seafaring brothers in her family, or perhaps through her relationship with her brothers, she met other admirals and couples, and maybe she saw a similar couple like this, where the wife traveled with the captain or the admiral on his journeys on his ship, and maybe she saw someone like this and she modeled this couple after them. And I like to think that that could be the case, because it's really a cool couple and they seem so down to earth. And then we have Anne's sisters. They're both just equally annoying in totally different ways, but equally annoying, extremely annoying. And the way that they use and or abuse Anne in this story is just awful and makes them terrible people. The next question is, which of Jane Austen's heroines do you most relate to? And it's so funny because the two characters that I'm going to say are like complete opposites, okay? Complete opposites. So you're gonna be like, and okay, all right then. So the first one is Fanny Price. And I say because Fanny Price, I identify with her in a lot of ways because I was always the good girl, you know, like I did not want to get in trouble. I did not like to be in trouble. And so I always did what I was supposed to, even if I didn't want to, which Fanny always wants to. So that would be a big difference between us. I didn't always want to be good just to be good. I just didn't want to get in trouble. And also I was extremely quiet and shy when I was young, extremely so. And as a teenager and even into my young adulthood, you know, I've grown out of it, you know, as you mature and you grow and you are more and more thrust into situations where, you know, you develop your social skills, etc. I began to lose some of that, but I'm still pretty introverted. So I can really identify with that with Fanny. However, I don't have Fanny's level of goodness. Like I said, I don't always want to do what is good. There's definitely a very strong rebellious streak in me. And so I can identify with Lizzie Bennet in many ways. She says kind of saucily to Mr. Darcy, she says, "My courage always rises with every attempt to intimidate me." And so I feel like I really resonate with that statement. And I feel like if I had been in her position and Lady Catherine de Bourgh had come and visited me, I would have said pretty much the same things that Lizzie said to her. I can totally see myself doing that, 100%. Which Jane Austen book have you read the most times, and did you give it a similar rating each time? And that's an easy answer. Pride and Prejudice, I've read 3 or 4 times. I think 3 times just straight through, and another time I read it in an annotated edition. And yes, every time, 5 stars, 100 stars. However many stars you want to give it, that's how many I would give it every single time. If anything, the more I read an Austen novel, the more I love it. The only one that is not necessarily the case is Sense and Sensibility. So we'll see how I feel about that after I read it in February. But for now, that's the only one that I don't appreciate more every time I read it. Number 4, what is your favorite aspect of Jane Austen's writing? 2 things come to mind, and I've said this a lot, so this is not new if you've been around my channel for a while and if you remember me talking about Austen. I love her characterization, and she does it better than any other author I have ever read, and I'm not exaggerating. She's tops. She's number 1. She's the master of the craft, master in her field, and it totally cracks me up that is what she admired about Samuel Richardson, because you can't touch her in this. Can't touch her. Does not even come. He's not in the running. He's not in the running. Anyway, so Jane Austen, her characters, like I was saying at Mansfield Park, they're so complex, and she's so subtle in the crafting of them and in the development of them, in the way she presents them and the way she portrays them. And it's just masterful and it's beautiful. The last few times that I've been rereading, or the last time that I was rereading through all the Austen novels, I was trying to figure out what is it that I love so much about Austen? Why is she my favorite author? And it came to me that when I finish an Austen book, like I want to be in that world with those characters some more, because I felt like I knew them, because she had drawn them so well. They seem to me like real people, like so real that I feel like when I die and go to heaven, I'm going to meet Lizzie and Mr. Darcy. Like I'm pretty sure they're going to be there because they had to have been real people, right? I mean, they're just so real. I wish they were actual people, live people. And the other thing that I really love about Jane Austen's writing is her wit, which again, it's obvious, but it also can be very subtle. And especially sometimes that's because of the language. You know, we're a couple hundred years removed from the language that Austen was using. It's developed a lot since then, and it's changed a lot, and it's simplified a lot in many ways. But some of the subtlety comes from that. But also, there's just subtlety in her writing, which takes so much skill, and I just admire it so much. But the wit is perfect. Like, it makes you smile, it makes you chuckle, it gives you insight into the characters, into the story, and into life at large. Yes, she was very, very witty. And finally, of the Jane Austen retellings you've read, which do you think is the best at keeping with the heart and tone of the original it was based on? And which retelling would you most recommend? So this was hard because, like I said, when I finish an Austen book, I want to spend more time with those characters. So I went through a phase a few years back for a few years where I read like basically every Austen retelling that I could easily get my hands on. And so I read a lot of them like in a row. And so they kind of all run together, and I don't remember all of the authors and all of the titles that I read. I did not track all of them on Goodreads. I only tracked the ones that really stood out to me as either being very good or not good. So I didn't keep track of all of them. So I really don't know for sure. I will say one series that I have mentioned before and one author that I know I will enjoy is Amanda Grange. And I think that she really sticks to the ideas, to Austen's tone and her characters, and honors the story that Austen was telling, even if I think she has some that are like variations, like they don't stick to the main storyline. They deviate from that, but not in a way that's, you know, completely implausible or totally taking you off the rails of what Austen was trying to do. Just exploring kind of what if questions about the storyline. The series that I have read for sure by her is her, I forget the name of it. I forget the name of the series. I'll put it in the description box, but they're the diaries of the heroes in the story. So Captain Wentworth's diary, Mr. Knightley's diary, Mr. Darcy's diary, etc. And I really love that because she gives you a perspective on things that happen from the male character's point of view, and we don't get that as much in Austen's novels. So, and she's very true to Austen's stories in this. She doesn't deviate from the storyline. She does embellish with some things that, you know, Austen doesn't tell us anything about what Mr. Darcy was up to when he wasn't together with Lizzie in the story. I mean, like where he is maybe, or like the basic outline of what he's doing. But other than that, there's very little information. So she fleshes that out and, you know, adds some other characters, whatever. Same with Captain Wentworth, etc. So I really enjoy those. I've mentioned them before. The other author I want to mention, and I think I've only read one by her, but I definitely want to read more. And she has a similar series. She just last year released, I think, Knightley in his own words, that I want to read. She has a series, which is like Captain Wentworth in his own words, Mr. Knightley in his own words, etc. Same idea, same concept. And I think she also is very faithful to Austen's telling of the story. She's just fleshing it out with her ideas of what the heroes were doing in their time when they weren't together with the heroine of the story. Other than that, a couple of authors that I have read one or maybe two of, so I can't vouch for all of their books. One is Laura Hile. I read one of her books that was, it was supposed to be Mr. Elliot giving his advice to ladies who would like to aspire to higher ranks in life. And it was so funny and it was so spot on. It was perfect. I really enjoyed that book a lot. And so I want to read some others of her retellings. There are a couple of websites that are really great for finding good retellings, and they do great reviews of them. One is Austen Prose, and I'll link to both of these in the description box. And the other is Austenesque Reviews. Austenesque Reviews is run entirely by Meredith. I also follow her on Goodreads, and she writes great reviews. So you can get an idea of the type of story each one. She'll tell you if it's a retelling, or if it's a variation or an adaptation, or if it's like a sci-fi version or a fantasy version or whatever. And she's pretty detailed about what she likes and doesn't like in each story. And so you can decide from that if it's worth your time. And then on Austen Prose, kind of similar, but I believe it's run more by a group of people, not just one person. And they also have a lot of reviews of all kinds of Austen related books and retellings, etc. So definitely worth following those two websites and following them on social media as well. Someone recently connected me to the Austen Prose, the Jane Austen Fan Club Facebook group. So that's been a lot of fun. And I hope you have enjoyed my answers to these questions, and I hope you will head over to Coffee and a Book and hear Charlene's answers to my questions. And let me know in the comments below, are you a Jane Austen newbie or are you a longtime fan? And how would you answer any or all of these questions? And I will see you next time. Bye.